Yo, what is up guys? It is Samool back again with another Epic 7 video for you guys today. And today we're going to be wrapping up the AESPA collab. All 4 units have finally been released. So we're going to be basically talking about my final thoughts on Ningning, Giselle, Karina, and Winter. Now I'm sure a lot of you guys are curious what's happening with the giveaway. So in the next few days I'll be announcing the winners. I'm going through all of the comments and the likes. And I will be picking 3 of the winners for that giveaway. So that being said, all 4 of these units honestly can be very good in PvP in the right situations. We're going to be talking about every single one and what situations they're good in. The only real unit that's going to be used in PvE, guys, is going to be Karina. She's a pretty decent tank, and she's also very good for Wyvern as well. So we're going to start off with the 2 units that I think are kind of like the weakest of the collab units, and the first one we're going to be talking about is going to be Ningning. So Ningning, she's kind of weird. She's an offensive soul lever, and for the most part you're only going to ever really use her against barrier teams. You're going to see she has barrier inversion into her S3, and it is super important that you bring her into a barrier team, because without having a barrier on the enemy team, you will not get an extra turn after using your S3. Of course, only if this is at +5 skill enhance, which I don't have. I actually used her and a lot of the other units as well on Grace of Growth to test them out, but you definitely want to have this at +5 if you plan to use her. Otherwise, you're not going to get that extra turn. So what happens is you S3, you do a lot of damage with that barrier inversion, you will dispel 2 buffs, and then you can S2 right after to actually CR push someone and also give them an attack buff, and that unit will most likely clean up the enemy team. Her S1, the stun's okay, but for the most part, you're only going to use her into barrier teams for the S3 damage combo into the S2 CR push on a damage dealing unit. So kind of like a cleave unit. The only problem is that for that to happen is that she needs to go first, and because she is a soul weaver, her base speed is pretty low, so it's kind of actually hard to make her work. You can't really pick her into World Arena unless you pick her against a very slow team, which is kind of hard to do. You're going to have to pick her very late into the draft, and in Guild Wars and in Arena offense you can pick her, I guess, into slower barrier teams. But right now in the current defense metas, there's so many fast speed contesting units like Conquer Lace and stuff like that and Lua, so you kind of have to be careful. So you're not going to use her that much, but in the situations where she's good, she's basically a free win into slow teams that have barriers. So next we have Giselle. Giselle kind of fits a similar situation as Ningning. You can only really pick her into very certain situations. She's going to be used purely as a single target nuker, right? You also get an extra turn after your S3, and if you have her on her own artifact, you also get 10 souls, which will allow you to soul burn your S1, which will pretty much also one-shot another unit. You also have your S2 passive, which is very nice because you'll get an extra 50% CR readiness increase from the buffs you get from like your DN, your Flan, your Million, stuff like that. Only problem is that there's so many units that can actually do what she actually does. So for instance, if I have a Flan and I S2 and Giselle, of course she's going to one-shot because she has crit damage buff and attack buff. If I do that to like a green Sid who's a 4-star unit and requires less Molagora, same thing. You're going to get the same result, right? Sid can S3, one-shot something, and then also S1. And the thing is, like, Sid actually ignores elemental disadvantage, so he's actually a little bit better. Giselle does more damage, but Sid is going to be way more consistent and can also be picked in a lot more flexible situations. So for that reason, I think Giselle is also one of the 2 units that's not that great. She is very fun to use, but you can always replace her with another single target nuker and get the job done. But that being said, Giselle is definitely fun to use if you have a team built around her. Now talking about the 2 units that I think are pretty decent, not like super OP or anything, but for sure usable in a lot of situations. So Karina, like I said, Wyvern tank, she's good in PvE. You can use her as a tank in general because she has 2 defense breaks, one on her S3 and one on her S1. She also has a defense buff and a barrier for your team if your allies get hit pretty low, which makes her a very good damage mitigator. And in PvP, guys, she's very strong because of her S3 and S1 scaling. You'll see at the bottom of the effect, you see damage dealt increases proportional to the caster's defense, and also a successful attack will deal additional damage proportional to the caster's defense to all allies on her S3 and to one target on her S1. If you can actually put her on her own artifact, she becomes becomes very, very strong. She does a lot of damage for a knight, and because you do stack her on very high defense, like my Karina's on the lower end of defense, honestly. I have her too fast. I need to actually upgrade her defense and probably drop her effectiveness and effect resist as well. You can actually do super, super crazy damage while being super tanky, and also, you know, you can be a threat on the field because if you focus other units, you'll see her push herself and get that defense buff to hit even harder with your S3 and S1. Or if you get focused down, you are super tanky innately because of your high defense and your bulk, so you're actually mitigating a lot of damage for your team that way. Very, very strong in PvP. Only thing is, like I said, you have to be careful because of the fact that she can get pretty owned by like anything that has a defense break, because she is a defense scaling knight. You're gonna have lower HP than defense compared to other knights, which means that if you get defense broken, you're affected way harder than a regular knight would be. So you have to be careful for defense break units, but overall she's very fun to use and very, very powerful in my opinion. Next, we have Winter. So Winter is honestly probably my favorite unit of the collab. Not because she was the first unit, but mostly because of the fact that she is super, super fun to use. And she's, I think, pretty niche, but in niches that you can pick her into, she's very strong, right? So fixed damage on her S3. All you really need on her is bulk, speed, and crit. And you also have your S2, which will make it so that you can actually cleanse yourself every time an enemy uses a non-attack skill and reset your S3. And your S1 will have stuns that you can actually soul burn, similar to Payred, to stun lock a unit down. Very, very fun to use, especially on her artifact, because of that barrier you get, which will make it so that the stealth you get from your S2 will be protected. And she's super fun to use because you can bring her into teams that have a lot of non-attack skills, Conquer Ilias, Lua comes to mind as well. Just anything in general, like any Soul Weaver heavy team is very, very vulnerable to Winter as well, because her S3 stacks very, very quickly, right? You can get this to 20k damage very fast at 3 stacks, just because her S2 is on a 2-turn cooldown. If you build her super fast as well, like, you're resetting super, super quickly. So you have to be very careful against Winters. If your team has too many non-attack skills, you can just bring Winter, and she's really, really annoying to deal with. Kind of like a Celine in a way, but instead of like an immunity effect, she's more fun, I'd say, and has like a more long-term effect. You also don't have to worry about getting CC down and stuff like that, and very, very fun to play with. I think Winter and Karina are going to be the 2 better units. If I had to rank both of them against each other, I'd say Karina is better overall, because of the fact that newer players will have a lot more usage out of her, and in PvP I think they have pretty similar usage in the late game. Giselle and Ningning, guys, I think Ningning is probably the worst, but you can definitely still use her if you need a barrier inversion unit. Just keep in mind her speed's pretty low. And Giselle, definitely a very fun unit to use and hard-hitting damage dealing unit, but for the most part, there's a lot of units you can use instead of her. Like even Sermia can be used like instead of her, like Green Sid, like I said, anything with an extra attack rate. So you have to be careful. That being said, I think this collab was a success. All 4 units are still usable in PvP. They all have certain niches. None of them were like overbearingly OP like some other collabs. Cough, Slime Collab, or Muru on release. But I think this collab was a success in my opinion, because all the units are beautifully designed and all the skills are pretty balanced, and they're definitely all on like the average to strong end of the meta for PvP. That being said, just wanted to share my thoughts about the current collab, and it should be ending in the next few weeks, so make sure you guys pick up the units if you haven't gotten them. We don't know if this collab will run again. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.